but that's very occasional.
And Councillor Campbell.
Yes, in part of your comments, you mentioned that you didn't think that the council had followed its own policy in regard to muggers. Can you just expand on that for us, please?
Well, briefly, the Leeds City Council guidance from 2019, December 2019, talks about the ambient noise level should not be increased with additional noise. I haven't got the document with me, it's back over there, but and it says that the noise level should not increase above the norm, the ambient noise level. And when as I mentioned earlier, when we actually recorded the sound, we employed a noise expert to do it for us, and he visited one of the properties that you saw this morning when on your site visit and recorded the sound over a weekend there. It was during phase 2 of lockdown, so all the pubs were open and people were moving about. So it was representative of the background noise to show that the noise from a pitch is likely to be at least 10 decibels higher than currently exists, and yet the instructions in the Leeds guidance say that it should not increase above 50 decibels.
So that's only a presumption. That's not a confirmation that it will be. That's a possibility that will be.
Well, if you have 5 a-side matches going, and you can have 4 going simultaneously, you'll have 40 players on a pitch. Is it likely not to be any louder than the existing noise?
I wouldn't like to say until I witness. I'm sorry. Council Reagan.
Thank you, Chair. Have you been privy to the information that there's going to be a 3.5 metre acoustic fence being put up, and there's going to be extra planting on the side of that acoustic fence to the boundary of the houses? Has your sound expert not had any information regarding that to cut out the sound?
Yes, our sound expert was aware of that, but we were measuring the ambient noise, and we have spoken with other noise experts, and nobody can tell us how much a noise barrier such as those being proposed actually reduces the sound. It depends where you are in relation to that. And as regards the extra planting between the houses and the fence, those bushes will be below the level of the fencing, so they won't shield any sound. And in actual fact, that planting would be taking place within the root protection area, which is designated by the council so that the existing trees are not disturbed.
Are there any further questions? Thank you, Julie.
Members, just before we do move on to the applicant's representatives, just a point of clarification: the hours are 9 p.m. On the application, not 10.
We now have Mr. David Curtis, John Bennett, and Kay Carter to speak on the application. Thank you. You've got 4 minutes between you three, not 12, 4 minutes. Thank you.
Is that the right one? Good afternoon. So my name's Dave Curtis. I'm the head of PE at Prince Henry's Grammar School. So this project has been put together through collaborative work with a wide range of sports clubs from the local community over the last 6 years, and was first suggested to us by the Football Foundation, as Otley was an area identified lacking such a facility. The project's taken on board a variety of mitigation measures, having engaged with local voluntary groups and statutory consultees to ensure that the pitch is considerate to the local setting, whilst offers much needed state-of-the-art facilities to the community for generations to come. This development will bring new opportunities to take part for girls, women and older generations, and add capacity to existing clubs whilst preventing overuse of existing grass pitches. As such, the facility will also greatly reduce the large number of training sessions and games that are cancelled every season in the area due to poor weather. The site is an existing school sports pitch. Lettings have taken place on the front of the school site for many years. The school are yet to receive a noise complaint about these. Such lettings and community education classes mean the site is already lit until 10 p.m. every night of the week, Monday to Friday. The pitch lighting scheme, though, will enable local club users to access the pitch without having to travel further afield and pay expensive rental fees at private facilities through the darker months. This is a key issue for our local key partner clubs and will enable them to access a similar facility for less than 50% of the cost. The lights are directional and target the playing surface, not the surrounding areas. When lit, the pitch itself will not be visible from neighbouring gardens, as the acoustic fence wildlife buffer zone will block out the playing surface. The light spillage will reduce to less than 1 lux before it even reaches the boundary of the school site, less than the light provided by a full moon. The lighting will automatically be programmed to ensure it cannot remain switched on beyond the agreed curfew times, which is actually 9 p.m. midweek, November to March. It's 8 p.m. in April and October, and there is no lighting from May to September. The pitch will obviously be used by the 1700 Prince Henry's Grammar School students through PE lessons and clubs. Our local primary schools will access the pitch through festivals and holiday camps, and our camp providers want to extend their provision using this facility, which will enable us to broaden our heavily discounted offer to disadvantaged families close by. The proposed 3G pitch brings the school's playing field boundary further away from the local residents and introduces an acoustic barrier next to the pitch's mesh fence, which, at the times when the school field is used, will reduce noise impact in comparison to the current situation. The noise management policies proposed and community users will have to adhere to both a code of conduct and dedicated parking on areas of the site. It's important to highlight various noise mitigation features have been incorporated. The acoustic barrier, seasonal limits on when floodlights and therefore the facility can be used, a reduction in the hours of use, a no whistle policy beyond 7 p.m. for several nights of the week, and anti-rattle sound dampeners on the pitch fence line. Having reviewed these mitigation measures and management controls, Environmental Health see this development as acceptable and offer no objection. This development will not only improve sporting provision, but provide significant ecological enhancements to the area. A new gated wildlife zone will be created consisting of large shrubs. This will encourage wildlife, but also provide local residents with more privacy from a school site that is already used by the community outside of school hours. This will also mean pupils can no longer reach the boundary fence by the residents' gardens, improving that privacy further. Other enhancements include the wildlife pond, surrounded by a wildflower meadow, tree planting, an apple orchard, bird boxes, a heated bat roost, and most of that will involve our young people working with volunteer community groups. This project is totally unrecognisable from the withdrawn applications. We've engaged with many consultees, resulting in numerous proposed mitigation measures. We hope that you feel able to support the planning officer's recommendation for approval, and that as a group of organisations, we'll be able to move forward with this very exciting project.
Thank you. I've had so many questions to ask before I visit the site this morning, but visiting the site, it condensed down because just visited answer my question. But what puzzles me, it says there'll be no whistle used after 7. What will you use to that? And I think I've asked the question already, does the site use at present? So another question is, have you got a lot of complaint from nearby neighbors at present that there's too many noise going on at any time, weekends or any time, because you've hired it out, so obviously there will be noise. Outflow is the complaint that you are getting.
So the first the first one was about whistle usage, is that right? So the whistle usage was actually discussed with our key partner clubs, who are Ollytown Football Club, Western Lane, and Poole AFC. And Kai's the chairman of Ollytown Football Club. Now, through training sessions, which is what the predominant use of this facility would be for our junior local sports performers, actually the use of a whistle is very few and far between. I've recently been involved in my daughter's, which started up in June, and you don't take a whistle to these training sessions, and so that's very different to a sporting fixture or competitive match. And so one of the things that we discussed with the key partner club is how often do you use, and actually it was resounding from all three partner clubs that they don't use them in their training sessions. So having the no whistle policy for certain nights of the week obviously reduces some of those moments, if you like, of whistle use, but also enables there to be some whistle usage when there would be competitive match play on the surface. And could you just repeat the second question? Never. No.
The question? Oops.
I've got a couple of questions. First is, are there going to be spectators around the pitch? Because they could obviously add more noise to what's going on the pitch, especially if their team's doing well and get quite enthusiastic. The second is, do you have a contingency plan if the acoustic panels aren't enough? If what you're planning to put in there isn't a sufficient sound barrier for the residents? Because I believe the residents are correct that the emphasis is now on the persons making the changes to ensure that there's no increase in ambient noise. So it would be the school. So what's your contingency plan there? You mentioned that in the evenings it would be training exercises. Are you saying there would be no matches or fixtures in the evening? That's the third bit. And the last bit is more of a housekeeping. Once you've got the planting in place, how often are you actually going to litter pick and make sure that plastic bottles haven't been thrown over the acoustic wall, and make sure that that doesn't become a litter zone that could look fine from the school side, but very unsightly from the resident side? Thank you.
Okay, I think I can answer three of them. So the first one about supporters, actually, the fundamental use of one of these pitches is for young people. For this pitch in particular, is for young people from our local feeder clubs to train on a regular basis without those training sessions having to be cancelled. Moving their training away from the grass pitches that they have to play on, which at the moment is very limited in all of our key partner clubs, greatly reduces the impact on the grass pitches that they have to play on a weekend, and therefore obviously reduces the pressure and hopefully means they can maintain regularity of fixtures. So yes, there will be some match play on a pitch, which might be more likely to be a Saturday or a Sunday morning, certainly than an evening in the week, where it would be fundamentally looking at provisional programme of use training for junior sports, football teams, rugby teams, and athletics groups. So that was the first one about, or the second one, so about evening use. In terms of supporters, yes, you would expect there to be a small number of parents that wanted to watch if there was match play going on. You don't get an awful lot of commentary from training or much enthusiasm to watch training, particularly if it's raining. But within that, and actually there are boundaries in place now for watching junior football. There are things like the respect barrier that you have to have on a grass pitch now, and a huge reduction in the amount and the language that's allowed and permitted at junior football matches. So yes, there would be an element of sort of supporters on the sidelines. In terms of litter, the site is cleared on a daily basis from our site team, and we would be putting in an additional member of our site team in place to help manage this facility moving forward. So in terms of litter, yes, that's absolutely something that's managed on a daily basis. If there was a situation where users were producing the litter, then that's again against the code of conduct that they should be following. And with the demand for such a facility, it's not hard to replace an existing user with a new user. The one about the acoustic fence, can I pass over to you?
Yeah, absolutely.
So in terms of potential further mitigation, I think was the question. With regards to, I think first of all, just to mention regards to the proposed acoustic barrier, that is based on a specific design. It's down to the actual two main factors: the density of the material that's used in that barrier, but also where that barrier is located in relation to the pitch. The further that barrier is away from the edge of the pitch, the less actual impact it will have. So that has been already factored in to the noise modeling calculations that have been carried out. Now, such noise modeling, and I'll probably sort of preempt a question to say, well, that's a bit of guesswork. That is based on data from other identical pitches where surveys have been carried out. So it isn't completely sort of plucked from the air sort of figures in terms of, you know, how this design has arrived at 3.5 meters high and how it has arrived to be in the location that it is proposed. So those are a couple of things to mention. Beyond, you know, the measures that have been taken currently, the various mitigation measures, there are other things that could be looked at. The predominant, or should I say that the loudest or most impact noise generally from these type of pitches is the whistle noise. That is the loudest, in effect, noise that is heard, even more so than players shouting or spectators. And that's obviously something that's already been addressed with the mitigation offered. You know, potentially there could be further mitigation offered on with regards to that, but that would only be if it was deemed that actually that is the cause of any issues with noise going forwards, if that makes sense. So obviously it's a bit difficult to sort of say exactly until, you know, if there were further surveys done once the facility was built, if this gets permission. Obviously those surveys we want to sort of pinpoint, you know, what element is it that we are saying is beyond where it should be.
If we were to ask the planning officers to put a condition on the application that weekdays after 5 o'clock, the pitch was only used for training and whistles were not allowed, would that give you a problem?
Yeah, it would be. It would cause a slight problem in that when we work with the Football Foundation, we're trying to hit a variety of users, as you'd appreciate. So there are key user groups that we have to target to make sure that we impact. For example, the disadvantaged cohort, girls and female sport, and then also at kind of the other end of the spectrum where we're looking at disability sport, but also older generations where we might offer walking football, for example. So because we need to try and have a variety of users, actually, yes, fundamentally the majority of those will be training sessions, but within that there might be, for example, a veterans team that would be playing competitive games, and that's why working with the reduced number of events of whistle usage would be far preferable to hit then the outcomes that we want to try and achieve with the Football Foundation of getting the right mix of users on the surface. Does that make sense?
Yeah, Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of things. So, firstly, who will be maintaining the wildlife buffer zone overall in terms of its landscaping aspects? With regards to, I mean, the little ones probably won't kick the ball as high, but some of the adults or the larger children or young people may kick the ball higher and over the fence. So would you consider additional ball netting if required? And then my last point is, are there any similar facilities elsewhere in the area? You know, I'm trying to draw out the need in the community, please. Thank you.
Can I make a point on the need, if that's all right? I'm the chairman of Ollytown Football Club. We have 384 players currently participating both in adult and junior football. We struggle immensely to find facilities to use. Our first team have to travel to Appley Bridge, which is a 15-mile round trip to access a pitch. They can do that once a week from 8:30 to 10 p.m. That's the only time we have had available over the last 4 years. There are other facilities. There are facilities at Menston, at Guiseley, Horsforth, Adel, I believe, but we cannot get on those pitches at all. And I would assure you that there is more demand for this pitch than the capacity of the pitch will have available.
Sorry, Chair, there was a couple.
Sorry.
The 3 other questions, Chair, or 2 other questions.
Yeah, top to that. I talked about the proposition of increasing female participation. Ollytown have just launched their first girls team, and they have a waiting list of 30 young girls already. The demand is enormous, and we are sort of on our own in Otley as one of the only towns or built up areas without such facility. And there are a number of these being developed across the city, as you'll well know, with the Park Life scheme. In terms of the management, then we obviously have a site team who help manage our facility. We also have some a grounds maintenance company who help with some of the larger grounds maintenance works that need to happen. But we've already engaged with a couple of organisations such as Wildlife Friendly Otley and the West Yorkshire Back Group. And Wildlife Friendly Otley in particular are really keen to work with our young people. We do a couple of kind of outreach days, one of which we call Timignani Day, where we work with the community. And we've highlighted that as a potential opportunity for us to really launch the apple orchard, wildflower meadow and areas like that, to make sure not only we're going to make sure before that we've got the right plantations going in the right areas, but then we know and understand how to manage that, including how we manage and monitor the pond. And we have already an eco committee on our student body that already look at these things, and we've actually already gone hit one of the mitigation measures and in technology we've created through contact from the West Yorkshire Back Group, the correct type of bird boxes that we need to install and want to install as part of this project. So some of those have already been produced by the young people. Your question about ball netting is just a bit of a no-brainer, really. If it becomes a problem that we need to address, then ball netting in specific areas of the pitch would be easily kind of put up. What I would say is the direction of play actually would be the opposite way for the majority of usage, but that doesn't mean there wouldn't be usage the other way.
Thank you. I was just trying to mitigate any potential issues for the residents should it be approved. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just reading through your proposal about the level of noise regarding instantaneous shouts, impact from the ball, whistle blowing. One of the conditions is that you would have strict management controls on players, player behaviour. Can I ask what they are?
Yes, of course. So we've already met actually with some of the key partner clubs who would be our guaranteed sort of first choice users and drawn up some terms of use. If those terms of use are obviously broken, there would be various ways of that being reported, such as, for example, from our side, site management team who would be there to monitor the facility, but also there would be the opportunity for either local residents or members of the local community, or maybe users before and after other users, to report such things to our lettings officer, which could easily be done by phone call or by email. And so that information would be available as part of the sort of the package on our website, and could easily be sent out to the wider community.
So that's the operational aspect of it. So what actually are the management controls? So for instance, I'm looking for things, are you going to say, you mustn't be screaming at that board over there? That's a ridiculous analogy, but you get what I'm trying to tease out.
Yeah, absolutely. Antisocial behaviour, if we were to bracket it like that, with foul and abusive language, for example, mistreatment of the facility, such as at a low level littering, such as at a worse level, other things that people might do on a pitch that wouldn't be conducive to that environment. Anything that gets reported like that would then be followed through. And as we've talked about before, there's enough demand to move users off their slots and bring in new users.
Oh, it's okay. Councillor Anderson.
Thank you. Do you have access to our papers or not? No, that's okay then. Right. In that case, then, on one of the paragraphs here, it talks about the car parking spaces and advises that there are a total of 206 car parking spaces available across the school site, comprising 79 spaces off the main school site and 127 off the Farnley Lane site. Now, how are you going to advertise the overflow side, i.e. the Farnley side? The reason I'm asking that question is I represent Adel, and you've mentioned Adel. That is the number one issue that we have, is advertising the overflow car park, because some people are so disinclined to go and look for it that they just start parking in the surrounding streets. So how are you going to advertise it or steward people round to park in the overflow car park?
There's a couple of things I'll probably say there. The first one, as part of this project, our lettings officer has put together school's first travel plan, which we've achieved. Is it a bronze mode shift stars award through the influencing travel behaviour team, and we're working towards the silver. So it kind of kick-started our approach to parking, if you like. We have the Farnley Lane end is significantly underused as a car park, which is something we'd recognise with our evening classes when there are clashes with other events going on. So identifying actually the access points for the pitch users and making sure that we can not necessarily prioritise, but make the area of parking available the most convenient for the pitch users, being potentially that north car park, which means then we may shift our evening users to the Farnley Lane entrance, if that makes sense. So hopefully by we're encouraging them just with making the most prevalent or the closest car parking available, that would be used by the pitch users.
Fine. What would you say would be your optimum, or probably maybe the maximum usage you're going to have at any one time in terms of people participating? You know, are you talking about 5 teams being present and 100 spectators? I mean, what sort of quantum are you talking about at peak? Do you think you will have the number of people turning up specifically for this purpose, in addition to the other things that the school also run in terms of the pool and various other things?
Could I answer that on behalf of Ollytown Football Club, who are probably going to be one of the biggest users of the facility? At the moment, our biggest usage would be the senior training night, of which we have 4 senior teams that train at the same time. However, what we find is that we have good attendance for the first and second team, but the third and fourth team perhaps don't participate as much as they might, or they should do. So normally speaking, we would have 40 to 50 people training to maximum. And I think it's important to state as well that the vast majority of our players are local to Otley. And so you know, there are opportunities there not to travel by car, but to walk or use public transport. But clearly that's the sort of quantum that we're looking at. For a lot of the other teams in the junior section, you maybe get 20 per session that will be training at any one time. So I think if that helps in terms of context.
So just to clarify then, so the car park with 79 spaces should, in the vast majority of cases, have sufficient capacity to meet any demand in terms of what's planned.
I would think so from Ollytown's perspective, yes.
Councillor Campbell.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Most of the questions have been preempted, but can I just three points. We heard a comment earlier on about effectively why this site within the school or within the larger school portfolio spaces. Could you just explain why this site rather than one of the other ones? I'll do all three if it's with you. I think from what I heard you say, you would not be averse to, if panel were minded to agree this, a condition which said something like, after 6 months of use, the site's monitored to effectively look at any issues that might have arisen and deal with them. And the third one, which I have to say relates to my own personal experiences of the school, and that's open evenings. Open evenings at your school, as you well know, are very well attended, and the car parking associated with that leaks out onto neighbouring streets, including the one to the east. Do we have a categoric agreement that on open evenings, the pitch will not be used?
Right, great. So firstly, why this site? As I said, this process started 6 years ago with a local organisation called Sport Chevin, where we looked at a number of sites, and the school site proved to be the one that has the parking, the changing, the security, the access. And so it came down to actually the school site, and I, within that, I also disregard the 6 pitches down at Wharf Meadows, where we have continuing security issues before we start talking about access. So it came down to the 2 grassed areas on the main site, one to the north, sort of east, and one down the southwest. And we have a very large bat roost at the back of the building, which would be directly impacted by lighting in that area. We've already put a lot of mitigation in place to support and make sure we don't have a negative impact on the bat population. So that was one reason why we couldn't go with the north site. Another reason is in terms of where the pitch would be cut in, actually you would end up then with a pitch below the level of the housing, which would have even more of a negative impact in terms of lighting on houses that were higher potentially than the base level of the pitch. So that was another thing that was considered. A third reason why we couldn't use the north was the complexities around access and being able to provide proper access for people of all abilities to use that back pitch. The East of Otley site was discussed. There are no all-weather pitches planned for the East of Otley site, so they are all grass pitches out there. And in fact, the rugby club are one of the users that want to use our synthetic pitch to potentially play games on for the juniors, but to train on. In terms of 6-month monitoring, I think we definitely would be supportive of that. We want to try and make this work, and that's why we've agreed to and work with so many people to try and put in the relevant mitigation measures that make the facility a sustainable one that kind of fits the context of its environment. And then the last question about open evenings. Yeah, absolutely. It's not just open evenings, actually. It's some of our larger parents' evenings, albeit we are only doing 2 of those face-to-face this year. I think it's 2. The rest we have kind of successfully moved to a virtual environment. And so we, at the moment, the plan, as far as I'm aware, is to stay with that some of the big events. But yes, bottom line, if there was a large event like an open evening, the lettings on the pitch would cease for that evening, and therefore that would help in terms of parking access.
Thank you. Councillor Campbell, there's something as forward planning for parent evening. There's forward planning for parent evening. I'm sure they wouldn't put a match on a parent evening. Any other question? Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Before we go to questions to the officers, do you want to say something?
No, Chair, I did it before.
Or did you do it?
Yeah.
Okay. So are there any questions to the officers? No? Oh, sorry.
Thank you. Just with regard the 6-month monitoring, can we put that in as a condition? And can we do anything about when the school is doing something else, telling them not to use the pitch? Is that within our powers?
Oh, sorry, it all depends what it is and the time. I'm sure the schools or whoever managing their calendar will know, for instance, they have got a parent evening for 2 hours at 6 o'clock. I'm sure they wouldn't put a football match or a rugby match at 6 o'clock. Planning application, go ahead. You know, sometimes,
Yes, but
you know, yeah, I know you want to hear from the officers, but sometimes we have to be real.
yes,
So
Chair.
just 1 minute, could the officer answer first?
Okay, I just appreciate that things change, and when staff change, promises that are made here at plans panel get forgotten. So that's all I'm trying to do, is to put some level in protection for the residents, that in 6 months' time there will be another assessment and the school will actually.
I totally agree with that, Councillor Collins, but sometimes, you know, we just have to think and look at the real thing and ask yourself the question, would I get married on Saturday and have a party and Saturday was not my wedding? You know, sometimes.
Could I ask Mr. Curtis to come back, please? Just briefly. What I was going to suggest is that the first issue, which is about the.
Sorry. Is it Councillor Reagan?
It is burning, Chair, and it's regarding the issue that Councillor Collins has brought up. I am totally against agreeing to any restrictions being put in for other than the open days, because the school on a 12-month basis have a right to do lots of things and open it up to the public and to their students. And I think we've got assurances from the team that they will manage that pitch in conjunction with that.
Agreeing with you, Councillor Reagan, because reading through the report, I can see where the school have tried the very best to accommodate everyone. I'm not saying restrictions shouldn't go in, but we must use our judgment and be real. But I can see where the school are really trying, and I do understand the neighbors' point of view as well.
Sorry, Chair. Sorry for bringing you back, Mr. Curtis. I don't think there's a particular problem on the first issue about the noise management and monitoring up to 6 months, because Mr. Curtis accepted that they would look at that. And of course, we could include that in condition 17 on the papers, which talks about the submission of a noise management plan to be submitted. So I'm sure we can suitably word that to cover the 6 months monitoring. The other one's slightly more complicated because we don't have a conditional that necessarily specifically covers that. And there's a bit of a split on panel about the open days and how whether we restrict it. Now, I think Mr. Curtis said that there wouldn't be playing on, they wouldn't have the conflict because it would be silly to do so for obvious reasons. But that is not written into this in any way. Neither would anything else be at the moment. What worries me a little bit is the piecemeal discussion about, you know, what shall we have in and what shan't we have in. However, it is really for members to decide as to whether they want that additional condition and whether we would just restrict it purely to the open days. And that's why I've asked Mr. Curtis back to see whether he's happy with the open days. If the majority of members only wanted to restrict it to the conflict that we might have on open days. Sorry, is it okay if Mr. Curtis just responds to that particular point first, Chair?
Yeah, of course. There is a lot of documentation I know within this, and Lawrence will sort of acknowledge this. We've written a car park management plan, and it is written in there that we will not open on such events.
Thank you, Mr. Curtis. That's my fault then. I hadn't appreciated it was in there. But members then need to discuss whether they want to go any further than that.
Putting forward, Councillor Hamilton.
Chair, I wouldn't be agreeing to any further conditions. We've heard good explanation. We've read our papers. The schools are responsible, you know, as a governor, and where they play sports, they don't play on certain days. They don't have those things in. So I'm quite happy to accept what the teacher said. I can't remember your name, you know, and I'm not prepared to support any further conditions.
Councillor Anderson.
Oh. Accepting for a moment the points that Councillor Reagan has made, right? On the, if down the line there was to be a problem, how would we be able to get enforcement to take action? Because one of my concerns is the way that we write our conditions make it very, very difficult on occasions for enforcement to take action. Now, if there was to be a problem, what would our enforcement section be able to hang their hat on in order to actually do something to repair the the situation? Accepting what Councillor Reagan said, so I'm not arguing against what she's saying.
Right, so as it stands in front of you, the motion, which is obviously on the front of the documentation, is defer and delegate. But I think members a consensus is that they would want to write in about noise management and monitoring up to 6 months, and whether any additional. Well, I thought that's what people had actually agreed to, because I think that's the easy one, isn't it? I thought. No. So what I'm just trying to say is you've got the motion in front of you as it's written, but with that condition 17 amended to make sure we actually cover that specific point about what happens after 6 months of monitoring, which Mr. Curtis is comfortable with. But regards the condition about additional open evenings, although we've got the issue about, conflicting with the open evenings, that is written into the other conditions, Mr. Curtis has just reminded me. But over and above that, if there's then spillage actually onto the road system, there's either the enforcement of that condition or it then falls to the Highways Authority. Ahmad, if Ahmad wants to just jump in.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, we've got a car park management plan condition. It's very clear. Development shall not be occupied until a car park management plan has been submitted to and approved in writing by the local planning authority, and that includes the measures. Yeah. Yeah.
So at the end of the day, it would be simply a breach of condition notice if that. But I get the impression from what Mr. Curtis has been saying that the school obviously are trying the best to avoid such situations.
Thank you. We haven't decided anything just yet. We haven't passed the motion yet. Yeah.
I as somebody who unfortunately set this hair running, if I am honest, I have to say that the worst evenings are their parents' open evenings, and I accept that. And if you just let me get to the end, right? And I accept that the school accepts that and has put measures in place to deal with it. Are we also saying, or are you also saying that we wouldn't have a 6-month review period?
It's already written in that it's gonna be.
No, it wasn't, but is it now?
Proposal.
So for clarity, you've got the motion in front of you on page 1, which is defer and delegate excess, and I won't read it all through. And then you've got 17 conditions that are proposed. As usual, we don't give you the exact wording because otherwise this would be 25 pages long. But the noise management plan specifically, we would ensure that it had the condition for monitoring and looking at alternative measures after 6 months if it was required. But the condition, the reopening evenings, that's actually covered within condition 6 in the car park management plan, which is what Ahmad's just referred to. So that's the motion. So the key difference here is the alteration to condition 17 to be specific about the monitoring after 6 months. And that's what you have to obviously vote upon.
I just want, as a point of clarification, I think the debate's been really interesting to follow, following Councillor Campbell's comment about open evenings and the trigger around that. The conditions before you actually cover that situation, so there is really no legal reason to duplicate that with new conditions. But I think that's been clarified through officers because you haven't got the full wording of that. So clearly you've got the wording, you've got clarification on the specific. I just want to check that condition 17, will that need a monitoring aspect amended to it, in which case you'll need an amendment to the motion?
Well, that's what I was just suggesting, that the motion you have in front of you is basically what's written on the front, but with the alteration to condition 17 to ensure that we've covered that.
So someone just needs to move, if they're going to be making a movement, to amend condition 17 as part of the proposal to include monitoring, just for clarity.
When it comes to parent evening, everyone knows schools. I thought so.
We've had the motion moved and seconded, but we need a vote, Chair. So, Chair, we need to vote on it.
So can we vote on the motion?
So
we have a second.
Everybody's gone quiet.
Everyone passed, so we need to vote on this second amendment.
So, can I just? So Councillor Reagan has actually moved the motion with the variation. So it's what you've got in front of you with the variation to condition 17, which I think everybody's clear on. The car parking issue is covered by condition 6 already. So it's been moved by Councillor Reagan. It's been seconded by Councillor Ray. We now need to vote upon that. But nobody put their hands up.
All those in favour?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
I'll go for it.
So the 6 for the motion. Against? Abstentions? So is that 4 abstentions?
Okay.
Not sure you're allowed. I still have a lot of concerns about how we enforce these things, because it sounds good, but I can assure you I am in continual fights with enforcement, and enforcement come back to me and say, I'm sorry, the conditions were not written such that we can take action. We've got nothing, you know, they are not actually reaching anything because of the way the conditions have been reaching. Now, this is more a general point, and it's something that I have made, you know, clear in the past, that I do think the way we write our conditions need to be looked at. And I was told at the time that they were now going to go past legal every time to make sure that they were written as watertight as we possibly could be. And I don't know whether that's happening or not.
So you're not voting?
So, Chair.
Please.
Yeah, we've got
We take a vote already.
We've got past that point. I'm going to record, if that's okay, that as an abstention, but I understand completely Councillor Anderson's point, and we'll make sure the conditions are written in conjunction with our enforcement officers to make them as watertight as possible. So, on that point, although the chair's not asked me, but I think I should, the motion in front of members to defer to approve in principle and defer and delegate has been agreed 6-4, but with the alteration condition number 17 to make sure we have the monitoring period in for the noise. Okay. Thank you, Chair.
So where am I now? We're done.
That's it. Next.
Yes.
Date of next meeting.
That's so the vote being carried. Yeah. Date of next meeting is on the 16th of December. Thank you.